Good evening, I'm David Harris and I'm going to show you how to make a bow today. Tools you'll need are a scissors, a needle nose pliers. This is 22 gauge floral wire. I have 3.75 inch ribbon. I have 2.5 inch ribbon, and this is all wired ribbon. And I found this really cool winter scene of deer and trees, which will go very well in a log house, which is actually where this bow is going. I'm making it for my mom. And then there's a couple of accent ribbons, a 1.5 inch and also a 7/8 inch holiday ribbon. So anyway, these are what we're going to use to make this compound bow today. The first step to making this bow is to measure off about a foot of the wire. This is 22 gauge green floral wire, and it cuts very easily. And after you do that, find the two ends, kind of hold them together and just pull straight on the wire. And when you pull taut on the wire, it will actually make a little V, and you can see a nice little wishbone here happening. This is all you need to do with this at this point. The next step is to choose your ribbon, and I'm going to go ahead and start with the largest bow, which is going to be this this sort of screen wire type ribbon. And I'll just grab a big hunk of it and start gathering. I'll make this a pretty good sized bow so it can go on a door or something, and so I'm going to put about 1.5 feet of this ribbon. I just squeeze it together, and I'll leave this hanging down. And I just continue now. What I will be doing is just making little loops. I'm holding this tight between my fingers, and as I pass, I grab and gather, and then we pass again, and I just, whichever way the ribbon wants to go on its own, I sort of just allow it to go, and then I gather it together in the center and try and just keep these fairly even. And then we gather again. And I'm going to make 6 on each of these bows because I like 6s. I think they look really cool. And so we just keep gathering and bringing it back to the center and just holding on to it. And this is number 5 here. And don't worry about if they're perfect yet, because you can always fix it up later. Here's number 5. And the ribbon seems to want to go this way for number 6. So here we have 6 nice basic little bow parts here. And now I'll take my V-shaped wire, and while I'm holding it, I just let a little gap between my fingers so that we can just pull that right through like that. And be careful it doesn't get all tangled up in the fabric. And then we pull it fairly tight. Make sure it's all pushed down in there good. And when we get to that point, I've actually got it going through here a little, so I'll pull it back out just a little bit so it doesn't get tangled up. Alright, now the 2 pieces of wire are sticking out directly behind here. And so what I do is I bring them together as tight as possible, and I get my fingers as close to the bow as possible, and I just twist the bow while holding the wire. And it seems to work the best that way. Okay, now we've got just one twist on there, and that's going to hold nicely, I think. I'm just looking at it to check it. You can always go back and undo it if it's too long on one part or something. Here we go. Now we tighten it, and now when I get it to that point, I'm just going to pull this a little bit tighter with the pliers. And now we've got our basic bow type pattern here, and what I'm going to do is cut the excess. I'm just going to cut these to the same length for now, approximately, and we'll straighten out the edges later. And so all that has to happen now with this piece, which is the base of our bow, is to fluff it up, and you can fluff it really easily until it turns into this great big fluffy bow. And here's another piece of it over here. And certain other bow fabrics, this doesn't look like much yet, but when we start adding the other parts, it's going to really become a lot more interesting. So that's the first part of the bow. And now we'll set this bow aside, and notice that it's got a nice hanging wire hanging from it right now. So what I'm going to do now for the next layer of bow here is I'm going to take a little bit longer piece of wire so that I can wire all the bows, the subsequent bows, with the same wire, and then we'll trim this wire short and leave the other wire on the large gold bow as the part that's going to connect it to whatever you want to hang it on. Always leave yourself enough wire to hang around whatever post or nail hook or something. So right now I'm going to give us about 2 feet of it, just because I don't know how much we're going to need. And so I just gone ahead and pulled it taut just where it is on the wire here, and we'll cut it off with our wire clippers. The scissors will cut it, but it'll really kill the scissors. So now we've got a nice 2 foot long piece, or a little more than that, that we'll be able to trim at the end. And don't worry, if you run out of wire and you want to put another layer of bow on it, you can certainly do that. It's just a matter of cutting another piece of wire and wiring it around when you're done. So now we start again with about the same length, because I think it'll be nice on this one to have all of these tails fall the same length. We grab about 1.5 feet or so here and gather it together in one piece. And then we want to make these loops a little smaller than the last one so that you'll see the bigger bow always outside of it. So I gathered one here and I just pull again over across and just make sure they're fairly even. And then we pull another piece. And I'm still going to do 6 on this one because my creative eye is telling me that 6 is the right amount for this one too. On the ones that are smaller, we may want to do 4 once we get to the top. So I now have 4 here. Let's do 2 more. And on the top piece too, you can always, the last 2 you can always pull a little bit smaller and they look very good. So now we've got all of these pieces crossing each other, and I keep them gathered together, and they're all gathered nicely together. So now I'll grab my new piece of wire which I've cut, and we pull it and find the center mostly. Doesn't have to be exact, but the more exact it is, the better it looks. But you can cover up a lot by just how you fold it. Now I'm pulling it tight again up against there. Now I'm holding the 2 wires together very tight toward this bottom piece of the bow, and now I turn the bow in toward me, which makes it as if I'm tightening with my right hand, even though I'm only moving the left hand. Okay, now we've got another bow basically made here, and we will just cut off the excess again. And at the very end we'll trim whatever shape we want out of the bottom. So now we have a second bow that looks kind of nice here. So let's put that together with this other yellow, the other big gold bow. And we now have a great base. So what I'm going to do now is take my wire from the center, and I'm going to put 1 wire around in between the top 3 of these, and make sure you get it in between the 3 of these also, in between the 2 legs here. So the bottom wire will go in between the 2 hanging pieces of bow, and the top wire will go in between the 3 on both bows. And then of course the better bows are the ones that are very tight in the center for the most part. So we turn it around so you can see the back side of it. Now I hold these 2 together, pull this in as tight as I can, get these 2 together, the 2 pieces of wire that are hanging out, and I start turning the bow in toward me again. Very nice. And it only takes like 2 or 3 turns. So what we have so far is a double bow. But we're going to do a little more, because I've got this really cool stuff for the log house, and we want to make this a pretty showy bow. So I'm going to set this aside for a moment. But before I do, I'm going to take my 2 longer pieces of green wire. I'm going to pull 1 over the top and 1 under the bottom, in between what I'm calling the legs of the bow, which are these little things hanging down, but I know that's not the correct term. So I now have 2 green wires sticking out of my bow right in the center. So that is what we'll use to connect and fasten this 3rd layer of bow. Now notice each time I am making these smaller, and I'm going to make these smaller on the deer bow now I'm going to use. I love this ribbon where it has the deer and a winter scene with the trees, and it's just really cool for this particular application. So now you may get to the 3rd level and say, oh, I really don't need to add any more. But at this point, I think we're just going to go ahead and keep going for a while just because it's fun. Alright, so now I've got a lot of this loose, so once again, I can pull a hunk of this bow. Now think about how you want the bow to be. I think that when you look at the bow, you should be able to have the bottoms of the deer's feet on the insides of both sides, so hopefully it will turn out that way. It doesn't always, but it doesn't really matter, but it's kind of nice if you get what your artistic idea is. So once again, I gather with about 1.5 feet of this ribbon, and I'm going to make another 6 bow, but smaller. So here we go. Now I'm doing about a 4-inch bow. The original bow was probably 8 inches. The second one was probably 6 to 7 inches. This is probably about 4 to 4.5 or so. So now, with this ribbon, be careful that the seam of it is always facing the right direction so that it looks good to your eye. And visually you'll know what to do, even if you're not Martha Stewart. Now, I'm just gathering just like I did on the other bows. I continue to gather these, and this one's a little thicker ribbon and it doesn't want to cooperate quite as much, but just get it in the general vicinity and with the right amount of ribbon, and it should be no problem to get it together later. So here's the 5th, and then here we have the 6th. Now, because we're going to switch to a smaller ribbon at the next point, and because this ribbon has this pattern on it, which we like so much to see, once I put, what I'm going to do is actually wrap around, once I get this basically figured out as to where it's going, I want to take one wrap, once I get the wire on, and I'm going to wrap around like a bow tie the center so that we can see the design of the deer. So what I do now is I'm going to take my big bow and I'm going to hold it centered here and between this leg here and this bow here. Now we're going to get that right in the center of the 3, and we're going to pull this one through. Once again, we're pulling tight, and we're going to twist our wire. Doesn't matter which direction, as long as you cover it with something so that you twist it the other way, it doesn't make a difference. Now, what I'm going to do now is take the extra long piece of deer bow. I'm going to wrap him up and through the middle, here wrapping all the way around all of the bows thus far made, and in between the 2 pieces in the back, so that can continue its way. And back around to the front, and I'm going to twist it so that it comes out with the feet next to the feet. And now on this back side, I'm going to take this piece of ribbon, or not ribbon, of the wire, and I'm just going to tighten that down around that piece so that it can't go anywhere. Okay, so far we have all these layers, and we're not quite fluffed yet, but we can fluff at any time. Now, when we do our final fluff, we'll fluff all the way down around as much as we can. But you see there's a nice finished look already to the center, except for those 2 wires that are sticking out.